This will be worksheet number 21, video C, where we are continuing to look at the information from chapter 5. Number 8 asks you to solve the following equations for the real solutions. When you look at A, hopefully you recognize that you can use the square root method to solve this problem. Start by dividing both sides by -5. You will have x squared is equal to 25. Take the square root of both sides, and you will get x is equal to plus or minus 5. And that is your solution. X is equal to -5, and x is equal to 5. B, again, you have no b term here, so you actually have the square root method. Subtract 11 from both sides, and you will have minus 3y squared equal to 84. Divide by -3, and you'll have y squared is equal to -28. Take the square root of both sides. Oh, we don't even have to, do we? Y is equal to plus or minus the square root of -28. We're asked for all the real solutions only, so this has no real solutions. It will have imaginary solutions, but no real solutions. B asks you to find the discriminant of the following quadratic equations and to put it on the first blank, and on the second blank state the number of real solutions. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that your equation is in standard form. So to do that, I will subtract the 2x from both sides and the 3 from both sides. That will give me 3x squared minus 6x plus 2 equals 0. So then remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So that will give me 6 squared, 36, minus 4 times 3 times 2. So 36 minus 24 gives me a discriminant of 12 and means I have 2 real solutions. B, again, my discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So that's going to be 8 squared, 64, minus 4 times a times c. So 64 minus 4 times 2 times 8 is also 64. That means my discriminant is 0, and I have 1 real solution. Number 10, what is the standard form for a quadratic equation? Remember, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. Vertex form of a quadratic equation is a times x minus h squared plus k. Remember here, the vertex is the value hk. Number 12, a ball is thrown from the top of a building and follows a path given by this function, where d is the distance on the ground in yards and h of d is the height in yards. Show how you can use the discriminant to determine whether the ball will ever reach a height of 60 yards. So that means that I have this b squared minus 4ac. If that is less than 60, it will never reach that. Why? Because that means the discriminant is below that 60-degree value. So when I substitute all the values in there, actually I didn't multiply that all out here, but the answer actually came out to no. So when you substitute the values in of 1.25 squared minus 4 times negative 0.05 times 36.1875, it was 1.5625 plus 7.2375, which is less than 60, so it would never reach that height. It says, using any method of your choice, find the maximum height of the ball. To find the maximum height, I would go with where the vertex is minus b over 2a is the distance forward. So minus b is going to be 1.25 over 2a, 2 minus 0.05. And then when you substitute that value in, you will get a maximum height of 44 feet. The other thing you can do is use your calculator. Just put this value into your calculator, and then when you're looking at the graph, find the maximum value, which is the vertex. Remember, the x-coordinate will be the distance, d, and the y-coordinate will be the height. Number or letter C, using any method of your choice, find the distance to the nearest whole yard the ball is thrown when it hits the ground. Again, you can use your calculator to do this, and that distance would be 25 yards. You could also factor it, but you have the use of your calculator, so you might as well go ahead and do that. Let's go on to the last page. So I guess this will be the final video. Actually, there's still a couple more to go. Let's just go on to number 13, and we'll put 13 on this video as well. 13 says, solve the following equations for real or imaginary solutions using the method indicated. Carefully show all your work and simplify your answers as much as possible to simplified radical form and or standard form for complex numbers. So remember, in completing the square, we're going to subtract the constant c from both sides first. So I'll subtract 80 from both sides. Then I will add to both sides b divided by 2 squared. So that's going to be 10 squared, which is 100. I'm adding to both sides. Then I'm going to write my perfect square trinomial as a binomial squared. And then I'm going to solve this for x. So I'll take the square root of both sides. X plus 10 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 20. Then subtract the 10, so x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 20. 20 can be simplified. So when we look at this, we have x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus. The square root of 20 can be factored. So the square root of 20 is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. 4 is a perfect square. Square root of 4 is going to be 2 root 5. So the answer is negative 10 plus or minus 2 root 5 is the answer for 13A. 13B, we have a leading coefficient that's not 1, so we have to divide all of those terms by 2. Then I'm going to take b divided by 2. You can put that in your calculator if you want to, and you will get that that is 3/4 squared. So I'm going to add 9/16 to both sides. My perfect square trinomial as a binomial squared will be x plus 3/4 squared is equal to, now I want to combine like terms when I'm adding these fractions. So in order to get 2 to be 16, I need to multiply it by 8. Therefore, I have to multiply -5 by 8, so that gives me -40 over 16 plus 9 over 16. So I have x plus 3/4 squared is equal to -31 over 16. Take the square root of both sides and I'll have x plus 34 is equal to plus or minus the square root of -31 over the square root of 16. So x plus 3/4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of -31 over 4. Subtract that 3/4 from both sides. And your answer is x is equal to -3 plus or minus the square root of -31 over 4. And that is the answer to 13b. 13c, you're asked to use the quadratic formula. Remember, you have to start when it is in standard form. To get in standard form, I will add the 10x squared to both sides. That will give me x squared. I will subtract the 3x from both sides. That gives me a -x, and subtract the 2. Remember the quadratic formula, minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So here, x is equal to minus -1 plus or minus the square root of -1 squared minus 4 times 1 times -2 all over 2 times a, which is 1. So I have 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus 8 over 2. So that gives me 1 plus or minus the square root of 9 over 2, which is 1 plus or minus 3 over 2. So that gives me an answer of 1 plus 3 over 2 and 1 minus 3 over 2. Here I will have 2, and here I will have a -1. So my answer would be -1 and 2. D, same thing, I'm already in standard form. So x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. That's going to give me -2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 60 all over, let's see, 2 times a, that's 10, all over 10. Sorry, I made an error there. I was trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. That's a 5. A was 5. So this gives me -2 plus or minus the square root of -56 over 10. -2 plus or minus, let's see, 56 is 8 and 7. So 4 and 14. Square root of -4, square root of 14, all over 10. So this becomes -2 plus or minus 2i square root of 14 over 10. So that's my answer for D. We're just going to go ahead and finish the last few problems. I think there are only 2 problems left on this worksheet. Number 14 says rewrite the function in vertex form by completing the square. Show all the steps. Verify that your answer is correct by graphing your answer together with the original equation and see if you get the same thing. So in your graphing calculator, after you complete the square, whatever answer you get, put that in your graphing calculator along with the original function and see if you get the same graph. Okay, so completing the square. Remember, I have f of x is equal to, group the terms that contain the variable and separate that from that constant 22. Remember, this is b divided by 2 squared, so that's going to be 6 divided by 2 squared, which is 3 squared. I'm going to add it inside the parentheses, but I'm on the same side of the equal sign, so I'm going to subtract it outside. When you look at that, this, because it's on the same side of the equal sign, should be a net 0. That means when you put them together, it should have had no effect on the equation. It should be a net 0. So now take your perfect square trinomial, write it as a binomial squared, and there you will have vertex form. F of x or y is equal to that x plus 3 squared minus 31. And I did put those both in my calculator, and I had the same equation. Last problem for this review worksheet is find the approximate roots or real zeros of the following quadratic. Round to the nearest hundredths. Okay, so you're going to put in your calculator in y1 this 3x squared plus 2x minus 6. Set your window to standard. That means you're going to go zoom and then down to, I think it's number 6, standard. Should be an x min at -10, an x max at 10, a y min at -10, and a y max at 10. Then you'll have your graph. And it will look something like this. Remember to get those zeros. When you have the graph on your screen, you're going to do second, and then that calc function, arrow down to zeros. The calculator will say at the bottom of the screen, left bound. And there'll be a cursor. You want the cursor to be on the left-hand side of the x-axis, whether that's above or below. You'll hit enter. The calculator will say right bound. At that point, you'll move the cursor above the line. Hit enter. The calculator will say guess, and you just hit enter. And it will give you an x value of -1.79 and a y value of 0. Then you'll do that again. Second calc. arrow down to the one that says 0. I believe it's number 2. It will ask you for a left bound. You want to be this time above the x-axis because that's the leftmost point as it's crossing the axis. You'll hit enter. It will ask you for a right bound. You'll hit enter and you'll slide the cursor down, hit enter there. It will again say guess. You should hit enter and it should give you the other side, which x is equal to 1.12, y is equal to 0. These two worksheets that I have done videos for are a fairly good representation of what you should expect to see on this Chapter 6 test. As I told you, there's a tremendous amount of information in this chapter. It was 8 sections long, covered a lot of material. So I hope you'll spend more than one session studying and you'll go over these reviews. Study hard, and I will see you on Thursday. Thank you.